take this time to welcome you to John and Alice Butler Hall. Please take a moment to locate the green exit lights near you. Our ushers are here to assist in case of emergency. At this time, please silence any electronic devices. The event will start shortly.
Good evening and welcome. Thank you for being here tonight and for being part of this community. I'm Liza Johnson, and I have the privilege of serving as the director of the Wendt Center for Character and Leadership at the University of Dubuque. At the Wendt Center, our mission is to cultivate good character and lives of purpose for the common good, making this a lived experience for everyone in our community. Through our collaborative programs, core courses, and events, we seek to inspire thoughtful leadership, meaningful service, and deeper reflection of who we are and who we continue to become, both as individuals and through our community. One of the ways we pursue this mission is through the Michael Lester Wendt Character Lecture Series. These lectures invite both national voices and leaders from our own communities to share insights from their lived lives and work, encouraging us to reflect on the kind of purpose that guides our choices and shapes the impact we have on others. By highlighting leadership at both the national and local levels, we're reminded that character and influence are lived out not only on big stages, but also in everyday spaces where we live, where we work and serve together. We are deeply grateful to the Wendt family for their generous endowment, which makes these meaningful experiences what we can do and what we can bring to our spaces. Tonight, we are especially honored to welcome someone who serves our campus community every day, President Dr. Travis Frampton. Since beginning his service as UD's 12th president, Dr. Frampton has led with vision, energy, and a deep commitment to the transformation of powerful education. In just his first year, he helped launch significant initiatives that will shape the future of our university, including the proposed College of Osteopathic Medicine, the expansion of our aviation program, and the addition of the Clafferty Center for Innovation. But beyond these accomplishments, what stands out most is his genuine curiosity about life's big questions. Questions about meaning, about purpose, and character. From a childhood spent exploring the woods of Alabama to a lifelong love of history, philosophy, theology, and humanities, Dr. Frampton has consistently sought to understand how stories shape who we are and who we are becoming. That passion is at the heart of tonight's lecture, titled Heroes, Villains, and Leading Roles, How Stories Shape Character. This evening, he will invite us to consider the foundational narratives we tell ourselves, the roles we assume, and how these stories influence our choices, our relationships, and our growth. Before we begin, let us take a moment for a brief prayer. Let us pray. Dear God, thank you for bringing us here tonight. We are so grateful for the opportunity to learn, reflect, and grow as a community. We ask for open hearts and minds as we listen and consider how we might live with greater purpose and character. We pray for Dr. Frampton as he shares with us this evening. Grant him clarity, wisdom, and peace. May our time together encourage us to become leaders who serve others with integrity and compassion. Amen. Please join me in a warm welcome to Dr. Travis Frampton.
It's June 2nd, 2010. For your entire life, you've been waiting for this moment. You made it to the major leagues. It's gone relatively well, but you're fighting for your spot. You're actually trying to stay in the fifth spot in a pitching rotation. In the previous couple of years, you've been traded by a number of teams, and you found yourself in Detroit with the Tigers. Again, it's June 2nd, 2010. You're the starting pitcher. As you take the mound, you must be feeling a lot of emotions. Like, I have got to perform at this moment right now to stay in the dream that I cast for myself when I was a young boy. The first inning goes pretty well. 3 up, 3 down. Second inning, even better. Third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth inning. No errors, no hits, no walks. No one's talking about it. You might do what only 20 pitchers before you have ever done in the history of a 130-year-old sport: thrown a perfect game. You feel the nerves. First out, second out. And so what I'd like for you to do is assume this role. It is now the third out in the eighth inning. You've got this out and 3 more to go. And you'll probably need the help of your teammates in the ninth inning to produce a Willie Mays type catch to keep your perfect game going. So let's see if you're able to keep this dream going in throwing a perfect game.
And a bouncing ball to second base. Guillen. 24 in a row for Galarraga. And a swing and a high fly ball toward left center field. Jackson is on the run, still going. He makes the catch. Oh, Jackson! Austin Jackson in left center field. A sparkling play. Here's the 1-2. Bouncing ball to short. Santiago, and there are 2 outs. "26 up, 26 down." Here comes number 27. It's Jason Donald, and a crowd of better than 17,000 to its feet.
The guy we've been waiting for all night.
Ground ball, right side. Cabrera will cut it off. Galarraga covers. He's out. No, he's safe. He is safe. He is safe at first base. And here comes Jim Leyland. Oh my goodness. Jim Joyce said he was safe at first base. You make the call. Cabrera, Galarraga.
Did he miss the base? He's out. Why is he safe?
He must have missed the base.
Are you kidding me? Why is he safe?
You see right here.
Why is he safe? Oh my goodness, Jim Joyce, no!
Oh, jeez Louise.
Oh my goodness.
What a travesty. What an absolute travesty for Armando Galarraga. Bouncing ball left side, Brandon in. I have never been this disappointed after a Tigers win.
Oh my goodness.
Armando Galarraga. What an outstanding performance tonight. And I feel for you.
Look at these players.
Unbelievable.
The players shouldn't get too much in Jim Joyce's face, though, because it's all said and done.
It's over. Let's go, boys.
I mean, it's done.
It's over. Tigers win it here tonight.
At least Jim Joyce is standing there and taking it like a man.
He is doing that. And Jim Leyland is letting him have it. Some of the Tigers players let him have it. I don't know, Rod. I don't know how to describe this. I just feel so bad for Armando Galarraga. What an effort tonight for Armando.
So how do you feel?
Working across teams is tough, but Asana helps you handle it. That's because
feels like it's not fair. I want you to put yourself in his position. Because the stories that he told himself, the foundational narratives that we'll talk about tonight, prepared him for his response. I'm shocked at his response. Galarraga's, not Jim Leland. Jim Leland did what a coach was supposed to do and go out and chew out the umpire. Who's the hero of this story? Who's the villain? If you're Galarraga, you talk about yourself as an average to a below average MLB baseball player. You know your talents are not like your peers in the sport of baseball. But that was your moment for baseball immortality, and someone else took it from you. I actually watched that game live. I had heard about someone being close for a perfect game and turned it on about the 7th inning and witnessed that live. And what I don't know, everyone has their own sort of reaction to that moment and other moments like it in sport. But I was taken at his response. Very stoic, composed. He got the last out. Some people call this game the 28-out perfect game. There have been several petitions to have the right wronged. It still stands as an imperfect game. It also makes me think about the stories we tell ourselves. As soon as I saw this, I thought, I will never forget Armando Galarraga. He will always be, one thing I think I can do for him, if I can do anything, is as a fan of the game of baseball, I will always remember that perfect game. There are 20 others that were prior. Several others have come afterward. I know of Don Drysdale's perfect game, but a lot of them, Mark Burley, White Sox. But that one, I remember it because it presented a moment for someone to be the best version of themselves. So tonight, what I want us to do is talk about the stories we tell ourselves and the way in which we cast ourselves as either heroes or villains or leading roles in our own stories. And I hope by the end of the evening, we will learn that we have some decisions to make in the kind of narratives we tell ourselves and the role we assign not only to ourselves but to others. So let's begin with a lecture. We all live our lives inside stories. Since humans developed the ability to convey meaning through symbols, rituals, and language some 50,000 to 100,000 years ago, every human being has lived inside a story. We are born into them. They are given to us, handed down from our ancestors, and then become ours for us to apply to new contexts, new perspectives, to either accept or reject them as we decide our own. Stories teach us who we are, why we are here, what we are supposed to do, and the lives we should live. Without them, we are lost. But within them, we are formed. Our values, our understanding of virtue, ethics, morals, taboos, social norms, and individual character require these stories. Whether we recognize it or not, stories shape and define character. They shape how we see ourselves and how we see others. Stories quietly determine whether we cast ourselves as heroes, villains, victims, or saviors, and whether we believe we are passive observers or active participants in our own story. Tonight, I would like to invite you to examine the stories you believe in, the stories you construct, and the stories you choose to live by. Who are you? Why do you exist? What role do you play in your story? And what is your foundational story? A foundational story is the underlying narrative, often unexamined, that explains who we are, why we exist, why the world works, and what role we are meant to play within it. It provides the setting in which character is formed, ethics defined, and meaning interpreted, shaping how we understand responsibility and choice long before we are consciously aware of it. A hero or a villain? It doesn't matter. You are the leading character in your story, not a supporting cast member. To understand ourselves, we must first recognize the narratives that already claim us, that bring us examples of the foundational narratives people commonly live by. You are the lead character. So what I've done is I'd like to ask a couple of our students to come forward and read a couple of examples of foundational narratives. The one we just witnessed was not a foundational narrative. That's an account. That's a story. That's something happens in life. What Galarraga leaned upon, the assumptions he had about what life brings him, he's got an operating foundational narrative behind his action. And if we'll just go ahead all the way down to the end, we should have 8 different accounts. As they read through these briefly, maybe you'll discover which narrative you adopt as your foundational narrative.
I exist because a long chain of physical events has led to me. No plan, no intention, just probability. The universe doesn't care, and that's not cruel. It's just simply honest. My purpose isn't given, so I construct provisional meaning. Curiosity, knowledge, and minimizing harm. Others exist by the same accident. We matter only to each other insofar as we choose to.
I exist because my ancestors survived better than others. Life is competition dressed up as culture. Purpose is endurance, strength, adaptation, reproduction, success. Others exist as competitors, collaborators, or obstacles. Morality is a strategy. I play the role of optimizing my position in the system.
I exist as a temporary self, an illusion shaped by desire and suffering. Purpose is not a conquest or achievement, but awakening, reducing attachment, increasing compassion. Others exist as fellow travelers, caught in suffering like me. I play the role of loosening my grip on ego and helping others to do the same.
I exist because I was intentionally created. My life has meaning because it is given, not earned. Purpose is to live rightly, to love, to serve, to be accountable to something higher than myself. Others exist as fellow bearers of dignity and responsibility. I play a role of steward, neighbor, and servant.
I exist to produce, compete, and consume. My worth is measurable by output, income, efficiency, and success. Purpose is growth. Others exist as customers, competitors, or partners. I play the role of maximizing value. Mine, and indirectly, society's.
I exist inside systems that shape me more than I shape them. Purpose is liberation from exploitation, from false consciousness. Others exist as oppressors depending on their position. I play the role of resisting unjust structures and pushing history towards equity.
I exist as my truth. No single story gets to dominate. Meaning is personal, constructed, and fluid. Others exist with their own truths that must be equally affirmed. I play the role of challenging absolutes and protecting plurality, even if coherence suffers.
I exist under a cloud of bad luck. Things happen to me, never because of me. Purpose is unclear, mostly survival. Others exist as a cause of harm or sources of disappointment. I play the role of enduring, not choosing.
Thank you very much. Would you please show our appreciation to these different perspectives? Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. Thanks. Now let me go ahead and say that these were not their worldviews. These were not their foundational narratives. They were reading types of foundational narratives that exist in our society. Some of them are familiar to you. There are others, but that's just, to kind of get us thinking about the way in which we see the world or perceive the world and our place in it does shape the way we look at events and accounts that happen. There are some narratives that are different because they all perform the same task. They explain existence, assign roles, and justify suffering. Which leads us to the question of whether some narratives are merely descriptive or whether some are creative, regenerative, and transformational. Here are some narratives from the Christian tradition that serve as strong examples. Let me say here that you know a foundational narrative when you hear one. It casts characters and identifies roles. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was formless and void, and the Spirit of God hovered over the surface of the waters. Jesus in the Gospel of Mark, or of Luke, once having been asked by the Pharisees when the kingdom of God would come, Jesus replied, "The kingdom of God does not come with your careful consideration, nor will people say, 'Here it is,' or 'There it is,' because the kingdom of God is within you." Paul's letter to the Romans, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, the foundational narrative of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, God's good, pleasing, and fulfilling will." The Didache, written by early Christians, there are two ways, one of life and one of death, but a great difference between the two ways. And finally, Augustine, "A human being, a little piece of your creation, desires to praise you. You stir us to take pleasure in praising you, because you have made us for yourself, and our heart is restless until it rests in you. Grant us, Lord, to know and understand." So re-examining foundational stories can open doors to growth, empathy, and transformation in a changing world. But every narrative has strengths and weaknesses. And to help us evaluate foundational narratives, especially their strengths, blind spots, and dangers, it is useful to turn to a thinker who made self-examination his life's work. And that thinker is Michel de Montaigne. Montaigne lived in 16th century France during a time when religious wars, political upheaval, colonial expansion, and profound intellectual uncertainty. Old certainties were collapsing before their generation. New powers were rising. Competing worldviews were all claiming absolute authority. Rather than offering a new system to replace them, Montaigne did something radical. He began examining how human beings come to believe what they believe. His great work, The Essays, is not a textbook or a theology or a manifesto. It is a sustained experiment in honest self-reflection. Montaigne does not ask first what is true. He asks, how do I know what I know? How do I know what I think I know? His guiding question, what do I know? That humility makes Montaigne a particularly strong guide for evaluating foundational narratives. Unlike thinkers who defend a single system, Montaigne places human experience between competing extremes. He notices how people become trapped by rigid stories, stories of power, progress, or certainty, and how those stories can blind them to their own cruelty, arrogance, and self-deception. One of his essays, entitled, I'm going to lose you here if I haven't already, Of Coaches. That's not athletic coaches, the buggies, coaches, things that carry people. We all on the same page? His question was in the 1500s, why do people need coaches to carry them when they can walk? And who needs to be carried? Think about that. And how will the people that need to be carried be carried? And his strongest scrutiny comes on those who need to be carried by people, not by animals. So you get the idea, a coach or something, a litter that you carry and people carry you as a king or a queen, so to speak. On the surface, the essay appears to be about luxury and transportation, but in reality it's a critique of how civilizations do storytelling. the stories societies tell themselves to justify conquest, domination, excess, and violence. Montaigne exposes how narratives of progress, religion, and superiority can mask moral failure, and how power often confuses itself with virtue. And let me say at this point, Montaigne reminds me a little of the prophet Isaiah, "Woe, I am a sinner among sinners," right? He is a confessing Christian. He's a Catholic in the 1500s, and he's also critical of the systems he partakes in. That's another reason why I like him. It's easy to critique what's not you. It's easy to criticize someone else. It's hard to do the difficult work of self-evaluation, of taking the plank that is in your eye instead of removing the speck in your neighbor's. In our discussion of heroes, villains, and leading roles, Montaigne reminds us of something essential. The most dangerous stories are not always the false ones. They're the unexamined ones. So, in this essay, I thought about just reading the whole essay, and I thought, no, I probably would certainly lose them at that point. I've got two quotes that come out of this essay. One's in the middle, and then one's right at the end, and it's really powerful. I hope I'm able to do some justice to this, but this paragraph that I'm about to read is about his critique. Montaigne was from France. He's critiquing the Spanish Empire that has gone to the Southern Americas to save it. So, quote, "Coasting the sea in the quest of their minds," it brings it kind of close to home a little bit, "certain Spaniards landed in a fertile, pleasant, well-populated country and made their usual declarations to its people that they were peaceable men, coming from distant voyages, sent on behalf of the King of Castile, the greatest prince of the habitable world, to whom the Pope, representing God on earth, had given the principality of all the Indies by declaration. That if these people would be tributaries to him, they would be very kindly treated. They only demanded of them food to eat and gold to be used in a certain medicine, and expounded to them the belief in one single God and the truth of our religion, which they advised to accept, adding a few threats." So he's critiquing his understanding, I imagine, of the way in which he experiences his own foundational narrative. So I'm going to say, here's a Christian among Christians. What we like to do is group everybody in the same category. So all Christians believe the same thing. All Americans believe the same thing. All Republicans believe the same thing. All Democrats believe, you get the point. We know life is much more complicated than that. As a matter of fact, I guarantee you we have probably shared foundational narratives in this room, but we all have different interpretations down to a person of what is required of us operating in that narrative. So by the end of the story, right at the end, he's critiqued the Greeks and the Romans and the European dignitaries that are carried by their subjects. And he's like, what is that really doing? Because the subjects don't seem all that involved or like their heart's in it, right? But they're forced to do it. They're forced to carry the king. But when he looked at the Peruvians, he saw something different. And this is right after he's told us that the Spanish ultimately end up killing the king of Peru, but not before this gesture by the Peruvians on behalf of their king, in loyalty to their king. So he says, let us fall back to our coaches. Let's talk about our discussion of the coaches again. He can kind of wander off in his thoughts. That's another reason why I like him. Instead of these or any other form of transportation, they had themselves carried by men and on their shoulders.
So the Peruvians did. That last king of Peru, the day that he was taken, was thus carried on shafts of gold, seated in a chair of gold in the midst of his army. As many of these carriers as they killed to make him fall. They're killing the people carrying the king to make the king fall so they can get to the king. Follow me? It's not a pretty sight to end a story on about coaches. As many of these carriers as they killed to make him fall, for they wanted to take him alive, so many others vied to take the place of the dead ones so that they could never bring him down, however great the slaughter they made of those people, until a horseman seized him around the body and pulled him to the ground. Period. End of the essay. So we know how that story ends. But he's remarking of this respect he sees in the way in which the king of Peru had somehow connected with the people so that they would sacrifice their own lives on his behalf. So if Montaigne helps us to learn how to examine foundational stories and narratives, then Ralph Waldo Emerson, a little more recent, helps us understand why that examination remains necessary, especially in a modern American context. Emerson was writing nearly 3 centuries after Montaigne in a young nation confident in its progress, its institutions, markets, and its moral destiny. 19th century America was animated by faith in reason, in industry, and in expansion. It was a culture rich in certainty, and Emerson, an American, saw both its promise, loved America, and its danger. Cautious about the way he and his people were operating. In his essay entitled Montaigne or the Skeptic, so there's a common thread, we're not done with Montaigne. Emerson does not merely summarize Montaigne, he reclaims him as a corrective to American excess. He praises Montaigne as the frankest and most honest of all writers, not because Montaigne offers answers, but because he refuses false confidences. Emerson is drawn to Montaigne's willingness to dwell in uncertainty without collapsing into despair or dogmatism. What he appropriates from Montaigne is not skepticism as doubt for doubt's sake, but skepticism as discipline. A moral and intellectual posture that resists extremes. Emerson frames Montaigne as standing between 2 rival foundational narratives. We heard 8, he put Montaigne within 2 that vie for our allegiance. And I'm going to summarize these 2. One is the materialist, someone who is concerned with the body and matter and materials and goods and selling and buying and pragmatism and being practical. That could be an extreme. And the other, and I find this a little more creative and humorous, he calls the abstractionists. And the reason why I find this humorous is because it might hit a little too close to some of us in this room, including myself, who came from the faculty ranks, because he's also critiquing scholasticism and people who just think all the time and are very impractical in nature. We don't have them here at UD, I know that. I've gone around and I've looked. But he says that Montaigne refuses both the materialist and the abstractionist, and instead he lifts up the skeptic as an alternative between the two. The skeptic is one who seeks balance rather than dominance, humility rather than certainty, proportion rather than purity. Skepticism does not deny meaning, it resists its overstatement. It does not abandon truth, it suspects premature conclusions. Its guiding question, what do I know? Is not an evasion of responsibility, but a refusal to claim more authority than one possesses. Here he goes to critique the abstractionists. They will be betrayed by a book and wrapped in a gown. The studious class are their own victims. They are thin and pale. Their feet are cold. Their heads are hot. The night is without sleep. The day is a fear of interruption from thinking deep thoughts. Montaigne, as Emerson says, I see plainly, this is Montaigne, I see plainly that I cannot see. I know that human strength is not an extreme, but in avoiding extremes. And the strong person for Montaigne is not the materialist who's pragmatic, not the abstractionist who loses his mind or her mind in thoughts. It is the person in the middle that can stand between being pulled by extremes and maintain balance. Does that make sense? It requires dexterity, focus, concentration, consideration of how you're being pulled. I'll just say here, that's why I think it's so important to read people who are no longer with us, because we might still learn something about our own problems in a world that does seem to be slightly pulled by extremes. You didn't ask for that, I'm just sharing that. It's my own foundational narrative. So if Montaigne teaches us how to examine our foundational narratives, and Emerson shows us why resisting extreme matters, then Viktor Frankl, confronts us with the most demanding question of all. What happens to our stories when suffering strips everything else away? Frankl was an Austrian psychiatrist who survived Nazi concentration camps during World War II. He wrote Man's Search for Meaning immediately after the war, not as a memoir, but as a moral and psychological testimony to what he witnessed. Writing both as a witness and as a physician, he was less interested in cataloging horrors than in understanding how human beings endure them. What Frankl observed was unsettling. Survival did not belong exclusively to the strongest, the smartest, and the most optimistic, as some founding narratives suggest. Instead, he noticed that people broke or endured suffering based on whether they could locate meaning in that suffering. When meaning collapsed, so did the will to live. When meaning remained, people often endured conditions that should have destroyed them. This insight led him to develop logotherapy, or a therapeutic approach grounded in the belief that the primary human drive is not pleasure, as one founding narrative suggests, or power, as another suggests, but in meaning. And meaning, Frankl insisted, is not something we passively receive from life. It is something we actively bring to life through responsibility and choice. Frankl's most radical claim is also his simplest claim. Even when everything is taken from us, one freedom remains: the freedom to choose our response. That claim comes into sharp focus in a brief encounter Frankl recounts with a young woman who knew she would die within days. This is one of my most favorite passages in all of literature. He states, quote, "This young woman knew that she would die in the next few days. But when I talked to her, she was cheerful in spite of this knowledge. She said, 'I'm grateful that fate has hit me so hard. In my former life, I was spoiled and did not take spiritual accomplishments seriously.'" Pointing through the window of the hut, she said, "This tree here,
is the only friend I have in my loneliness. Through the window, she could see just one branch of a chestnut tree. And on the branch were just 2 blossoms. I often talk to this tree, she said to me. I was startled, and I didn't know how to take her words. Was she delirious? Did she have occasional hallucinations? Anxiously, I asked her if the tree replied, yes. What did it say? It said to me, I am here. I am here. I am life. I am eternal life. Frankl does not present this moment as hallucination or denial. He presents it as meaning-making. For the purposes of evaluating foundational narratives, Frankl's contribution is decisive. Circumstances may shape us, limit us, or even wound us, but they do not determine us. The story we tell ourselves about who we are and what we are called to do remains, at least in part, ours to define. Suffering does not destroy us. Suffering without meaning does. Human beings always retain the freedom to choose their response to circumstances, even when they cannot change the circumstances themselves. Let's switch gears to our last gear. In East of Eden, John Steinbeck gives us one of the most important moments in modern American literature, at least from my perspective. What do I know? Not because something dramatic happens on the surface, but because a character's story about himself is fundamentally altered. In East of Eden, it is set primarily in California's Salinas Valley and spans several generations. At its core, it is a retelling of the biblical story of Cain and Abel. Steinbeck is not interested in simply retelling this account. He is interested in what that story continues to say about love, rejection, and moral responsibility in the modern life. Let me say, John Steinbeck felt that the Bible still had stuff to say to the modern world. So he wrote a story about a recounting of the Cain and Abel story through his own experience in California. The novel centers on the Trask family, particularly the relationship between the father, Adam Trask, Adam, and his 2 sons, Aaron and Caleb. Aaron appears naturally good, gentle, and morally upright. Caleb, known as Cal, is perceptive, intense, emotionally volatile, and deeply self-aware. From a young age, Cal senses that something in him is darker, more complicated, and dangerous. As Cal grows, he becomes haunted by a belief that he will feel familiar to many people, that who he is already been decided. Cal comes to believe that he has inherited his mother's moral corruption and that this inheritance explains his envy, his anger, his capacity for harm. At the same time, he longs desperately for his father's approval and blessing, interpreting every disappointment as confirmation that he, Cal, is fundamentally flawed. He grows up caught between 2 powerful, suffocating foundational narratives. The first is biological moral determinism. Cal believes he has inherited darkness, his mother's cruelty, his own impulses, his jealousy, his capacity to do harm. And in his story, character is fate. Who you are is already written. If you are
Cain, you will act like Cain. And the second narrative he wrestles with is moral absolutism. That's the belief that goodness is measured by performance and approval. If only I could please Dad just a little more, then I'll be worth something. In this story, love must be earned. Failure confirms unworthiness. Cal desperately wants his father's blessing, but every rejection reinforces the story that he is, at his core, bad. Caught between these two narratives, I cannot help who I am. It's Mom's fault. I will never be good enough. It's Dad's fault. Cal reaches a breaking point. If either story is true, then struggle is meaningless. Repentance is just cosmetic. And hope is an illusion. And by this point in the novel, Cal turns to Lee. You should read the novel. Lee's a great guy. The Trask family's help and confidant. Lee is not merely a supporting character. He functions like Montaigne's skeptic. He refuses easy answers, and most importantly, he refuses to let Cal surrender his own accountability. Lee introduces Cal to a close reading of the Genesis story of Cain and Abel. Lee says, in Genesis, Cain is warned by God before he murders his brother Abel. Cain is angry, resentful, and feels rejected. God tells him that what? Sin is crouching at the door, desiring him. But then comes the crucial line in the original Hebrew. God does not say Cain will master sin, nor that Cain must master sin. The verb is ambiguous. It opens a question rather than closing it. And if you like biblical studies and biblical hermeneutics and studying biblical languages, there's actually a passage where Lee goes into sort of like Hebrew grammar and lexicographical work on a word in Hebrew. And he says it's not you must or that you will, it's that you may. Lee insists on a more faithful and troubling translation, timshel in Hebrew. Thou mayest. You may master sin. The tragedy of Cain is not that he was born evil, but that he was capable of choosing otherwise and did not. This unresolved tension in Genesis becomes a moral backdrop for Cal's entire life. You may choose. This moment, it's not comforting. It does not excuse Cal's actions. It does not deny his capacity for wrongdoing. Instead, it places responsibility squarely on his shoulders. Lee tells Cal, in effect, you are not doomed, but you are accountable. Cal is no longer merely a victim in his narrative or his circumstances. He is given something far more demanding and more dignifying, the responsibility of choice. So let's pull all this together in conclusion. We've spent our time tonight with thinkers and storytellers separated by centuries and circumstances, yet all wrestling with the same human question. How do the stories we believe in shape who we become? And each of our authors, Montaigne and Emerson and Frankl and Steinbeck, give their own insight into ways we can navigate through this challenge. Together, our authors remind us of something both liberating and demanding. We are responsible for the foundational narratives we choose to believe and live in. Those narratives quietly define what character looks like. They shape what we consider ethical. They determine what we excuse, what we resist, and what we aspire to become. If your story tells you that nothing matters, then responsibility feels optional. If your story tells you that everything is fixed, then effort feels pointless. If your story tells you that you must always be the hero, then humility disappears. And if your story tells you that you are always the victim, then agency slowly erodes away. But if your story leaves room for reflection, restraint, and choice, then growth becomes possible. This is why examining our foundational narratives is not an abstract exercise, it is a moral one. The stories we live inside become the settings in which our character is formed. They shape how we treat others, how we face failure, how we endure suffering, and how we react after a blown call in a perfect game. So the invitation now is simple, however, not easy. Pay attention to the story you are telling yourself about who you are. Notice the role you have assigned yourself. Ask whether that story still serves truth, dignity, and responsibility. Does your story merely justify your behavior and actions in the world? Or does it challenge you to become accountable to others and the roles you assign to them? Because you are not merely in a story, you're becoming one. And the most important question is not whether your story is dramatic, successful, or admired, but whether it is forming the kind of character you are willing to live with. The ancient word still awaits us, as it waited for Cain, for Cal, and for all who stand between fate and despair. Timshel, you may choose. And if you do, your story will be better for it. Thank you.
So thank you so much, Dr. Frampton, for the stories that we tell ourselves and how powerful they are and the power of our choice and responsibility in that. So let's give him another round of applause for his message and for his story today. What I'd like to do is open up for Q&A. So if we have a few questions around President Frampton's presentation, we'd offer that. And we have Professor Hoff, who has a microphone. So if you do have a question, please raise your hand. Also, our other mentor, Professor Welsh, will be helping as well. So if you do have a question, please raise your hand and we'll get that microphone to you.
So intimidating.
There's one in the back. Yes, all the way in the back.
Thank you. Okay. Curious, that was awesome, but what is your foundational story now and how has it changed throughout your life?
Yeah, we don't have that much time, but I anticipated this question might come up. I think you know, you're born into a story, right? So my assumption is that we're all born into stories. Even the stories you reject, you can't get rid of them. And even getting rid of one, you have to have a story that does that serves that purpose to get rid of the story you were given. I grew up in, most of my early childhood was in Birmingham, Alabama. And I was told once, after I had gone to Europe by friends of mine who were, one was a self-proclaimed agnostic, the other one was atheist, and they were great friends of mine, and I learned a lot from them. But I remember one time they said, you know, you're Christian and you believe in a God because, well, you were born in the South in the United States. So you heard some of the narratives tonight that I have no choice in it. And sociologically, I mean, I get it. I understand what they're saying. I grew up in the South. Had I grown up, they said, had I grown up in India or in Asia, I might have been Buddhist or Hindu, Middle East, maybe Jewish or Muslim. I would have had inclinations to find some greater, bigger purpose. And on one level, I intellectually understood what they were saying. Now,
I'm probably sure this is, when I was a kid, I used to go out in the woods, and I just felt, before I could intellectualize anything, I just felt like I was part of something bigger than myself. Just in woods that were stuck in a suburb neighborhood. But it was enough, there were enough trees for me to lose myself in it. And I just remember having that thought. Fast forward, then I received kind of stories, Christian stories and narratives that shaped me. Now fast forward to when I'm in Europe and with my friends. And I don't, I'm kind of like in Montaigne. Here's one thing, you're either this, they're going to explain my whole existence. I felt like that was a dehumanizing process. It's like you're nothing other than your environment. And I didn't want, I got the intellectual argument. I get the point. But I know how it felt. And I know it didn't explain the totality of that experience and that understanding for me. Does that make sense? So I put it back on them too. I said, that's fair, I get it. But if I'm Christian because I grew up in the South, you're agnostic and atheist because you grew up in Europe after the religious wars and after the death of the institutional church. So you're not atheist and agnostic because you have these great visions or ideas and reasons for believing there is no God or doubting that you could even say that. You're just also a product of your environment. And you know what happened after that? They said there was respect, understanding, and we never got to the point of winning. Right? It was the relationship that was most important. And I get choked up when I talk about this, but I'm not going to do it. 2 years later, I'm back in the United States. I'm at Lowe's and I had one of those old Nokia phones, the indestructible Nokia phones. You know what I'm talking about? You could play Snake on it. You remember? I get a call, unknown, on the caller. It was the day before Christmas. And I'm trying to get something. I'm like, who? Hello? Travis, this is their names. They're both from Portugal. How are you doing? I said, great. Who is this? This is so-and-so. Oh my gosh, what are you guys doing? This is great. We wanted to call and wish you Merry Christmas because we know it's important to you. My religion teaches unconditional love, and that's exactly what I felt. Unconditional love. There was no condition for their acceptance of me. So I don't know if that addressed I have foundational narratives. Or narrative. Sometimes it might be narrative, who knows?
Thank you for that question. We have time for maybe one more.
I'm older than almost everybody here. And I think that now I feel so distracted so often during the daytime. I have my phone, I have other people. But at night, when I wake up, and there's nothing else to do but be kind of introspective about who I am, that's a great time to try to figure out what it's all about, to try to create my own story. You talked about baseball. I'm going to be 80 next year, so I'm going into the 9th inning. And it's necessary for people my age to kind of look back and try to figure out what I did right and what I did wrong and what my story is and what it's not. But my challenge to you younger people is don't be afraid to be by yourself. And when you're by yourself, really listen to your soul and try to figure out what's special about yourself. Create your own story, create your own worldview, and be a gift to the rest of us.
Thank you. Well, let's give President Dr. Frampton one more round of applause for his message tonight. Thank you so much. Oh, we have one more question? Okay.
I have one final comment. President Frampton, can we finish that story with Armando Galarraga?
Oh.
Yes. And I'll do this quickly. What I found so impressive, Jim Joyce, the umpire, was known as being one of the best umpires in the MLB. Players respected him. You know, if you saw his angle, he's looking straight on, so you might understand his understanding of what happened. He knew in his heart of hearts he made the right call, and people, you know, he said, "I'm not going to give this to you," is what he said. As soon as he saw the replay, he broke down in tears. So that's the reason, you know, he's the enemy early on. You know, you kind of look at, oh, the mean umpire, he took away the perfect game. And then he just breaks down in tears, and he talks to Armando, and he says, I'm sorry, I got this wrong. He used some expletives. But he said, I got this wrong. And the next day, so Jim Leland, the manager of the Tigers, and Galarraga said this was the best decision that manager ever made. That night, when the ump went home, he and his family were getting death threats for taking that away from Armando. So the next day, he's coming out the gate. He was first base umpire. The next game, he has to be behind the plate. You know how many calls you make behind the plate? It's like you have to be on your game the next day. He's tearing up. He's walking out. And Jim Leland, the manager, said as soon as he comes out, he told Armando to dress in his uniform, which typically you won't do after you pitch the day before. Get in your uniform, gave him the starting lineup, and made Armando give Jim Joyce the starting lineup to show everybody that there's a story beyond that story about redemption. Armando pats him on the back. Jim Joyce pats him on the back. They shake hands. So to me, it's a wonderful closure in some ways of someone asking for forgiveness in your story. The importance of you granting that to somebody else because they're vulnerable at that moment. And then when you offer that, there's a moment, who knows what their foundational narratives were, but that handshake is a beautiful example of reaching beyond our stories. The phone call in Lowe's is a wonderful example of reaching beyond your foundational narratives to care about what is most important, our relationships. So they've done 2 documentaries on this. One's on ESP. Please go YouTube, Armando Galarraga. It's a wonderful story. There's been a book, and they still haven't corrected the error. There's a little following about that. But to me, it's a wonderful example, sport providing sort of a metaphor of how we can pull ourselves back together through forgiveness and reconciliation. And the most important foundational narratives call us to do that all the time. Ask for forgiveness. You're not perfect. And that's what, you know what? That's one last thing. I'm sorry. That's what Armando said. Sorry.
You're okay.
That's what Armando said. Why did you respond that way? And it created the title of one of the documentaries. Armando said, nobody's perfect. He didn't throw the perfect game due to the rules, and the ump wasn't perfect either. So remember Armando Galarraga, because we need to remember stories like that to elevate our stories. Okay?
Great.
Thank you.
One more round of applause. Thank you so much. So Dr. President Frampton will be out there, but if you'd like to exit, and then he will be going around. So if you'd like to talk with him or thank him or ask him a question, he will be available. So in the next 5 or 10 minutes. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you. Appreciate it. Where were you when I was in college? You hear that?
Reading Steinbeck.